Hello from Cork.
Hello from New York.
It's Misha Moira Shanachie Corky. It's Maria, the Cork-based storyteller.
It's me, Jim, here in Fayetteville, New York.
We can't wait to tell you a few stories. And we're building a story bridge between Cork and New York, aren't we, Jim?
We are. And it has taken so many unexpected and beautiful turns. It's really beautiful.
That's the thread of story for you. It's a real weave.
I'll start by sharing a story that is familiar to many people, but I'll share a story about the story afterwards. This is a story that it turns out has traveled around the world more widely than I would have expected. One of the names of it is Love Like Salt. And so here's how the story goes. There once was, of course, as there always was, a king. And this king, as so often happens, had 3 daughters. And some of you know already who those 3 daughters were. There was the eldest daughter, who was the pride of his heart and was smart and strong. There was the middle daughter, who did everything she could to make her own space, given the little bit of room that the elder daughter had left. Mm-hmm. And there was the youngest daughter, who was the apple of his eye. Now, as with most stories about kings, this king was not necessarily the most enlightened person in the world. And he was, in fact, filled with a lot of self-love. And so one day he came to his 3 daughters and he said, would you please just tell me, how much do you love me? And they all knew that this was a test. And so the eldest daughter said, Father, I love you more than this entire kingdom of yours. That's how much I love you. And the king said, oh, of course you do. And he gave her a great diamond jewel. And the second daughter, who had to do better than that, of course, said, Father, I love you more than the whole world. Oh, he loved that even more, and he gave her this wonderful gown. And then he turned to his daughter, his youngest daughter, the apple of his eye, who he loved more than the others. There's no hiding it. And he said, how much do you love me? And she looked at him and she said, do you really need me to tell you? And, Father was not happy with that. Yes, of course, your 2 sisters have given me an answer. You should too. And she said, Father, I love you more than salt. You love me more than salt? The whole kingdom, the whole world, and salt? I can't believe it. Get out of here. He was not, again, the most enlightened person. And he banished her from the kingdom. And she had to make her way on her own because, everybody knew that she had been banished. Well, she did the best she could. A few people took her in, but, her love was true. And she had to find a way to let her father know that. And so months went by, and she decided that she could learn to become a cook. And so she, as with everyone who takes on a new career, she had to start out as the scullery maid, and then, she'd do a little bit of this, and finally she got to the point where she could help in the kitchen. And so in disguise, she presented herself to the kitchen, to the king's kitchen. Now, truth be told, the woman who was the head of that kitchen loved her too. And so she revealed herself to her. And she said, I would like to teach my father a lesson. Would you help me? And she said, of course. She said, would you please make a dinner without any salt at all? Nothing in none of the dishes. And tell my father that you have a new chef who's brought you these great recipes, and that's what you're featuring, so that you don't have to take, the blame for how badly it's going to taste. And of course, that's what happened. And they cooked this tremendous meal with all sorts of dishes, but all as bland could be. And they brought them out, and his daughter in disguise, and he's so full of himself, he doesn't even recognize his own daughter, is presented as the brain behind this new set of dishes. And he just spits out the food and said, how terrible is this food? There's no flavor to it. This is worse than bad. And she said, well, Your Highness, this is what food is like without salt. Well, why would you eliminate salt? Why would you do that? And she looked at him and she put her hands in his and she said, Father, I love you more than salt. And his heart broke open and he gathered her back up and he proclaimed his love for her, finally, rather than her love for him.
Oh, Jim, I love that story. It's so beautiful. I remember in school when we were kids being told that one time salt was more expensive than gold.
Yes.
Because it preserved things and because it made things taste better. This is in the time before refrigerators and other spices, So, yeah, that's an amazing story. And two stories rose up in my brain and started fighting when you were telling that story. And the first of them is a story from Cove that's over 200 years old. And the other is a story that my sister collected from one of the elders of Cork. It's a true story. So I'm going to tell you the myth first. And then if there's still room, as we're telling stories today, I'll tell you the second one. But we'll see how the threading goes. We'll see how the story weaving goes. So this story, Jim, is about Muirish. Muirish was one of these 40-year-old sons of Ireland who had come at the end of his family, and he was so beloved by everybody, but especially by his Irish mammy, that he never even had to crook a finger to be fed. He'd be thinking about his breakfast in the morning and about how he liked his egg just so, with the yellow bit a little bit liquidy, but the white bit solid. He didn't like any of that white jelly stuff around his yolk. And he'd be only thinking about it, and it would appear in front of him, and his mother would take the top off it for him, and she'd make little soldiers out of the toast for him. And so he never had to make his breakfast himself. And then he'd go off and he'd do his work, and he loved horses, Jim. He loved them so much, and they loved him. And some people would have said of Muirish that he preferred horses to the company of people. And then he'd be thinking about his dinner. And just as he was having the first thought poking into the front of his brain, his mother would have the dinner out before him. And the years passed, and the little white cottage on the top of a cliff in Ireland began to empty out. First his grandparents went to heaven, and then all of his brothers and sisters, they got lives of their own, and they left that small cottage. And then his mom and dad, one by one, they also crossed the threshold. And he was in the little white cottage on his own, and he was thinking to himself, I should have thought about this before now. I should have gotten myself a wife. And then he'd stop thinking about it and he'd carry on with his day. And in those days, you can't even imagine it now, but in those days, there was no interruption from technology, Jim. There was no televisions. Radios were rare. There was no telephones. There was nothing but him and his own company inside in the cottage. And on one October day in Ireland, when the sky was dark, he got up out of his bed and he put on his trousers and his clothes and he looked at his boots and he said, "Boots, where are you going to take me today?" And the boots decided to take him down the hill that day. And the Atlantic Ocean, she was singing her song, whoosh, and she was crashing off of the rocks at the edge of Éire in Cork City that you'll see next spring, Jim. And when he saw it, it reminded him of all of the stories of the Coppel Bonamara, the white horses of the sea, and how they weren't made of blood and bone and sinew. Oh no, they were made of spray and spirits and stories, Jim. And he sat up on top of the grey rock and he kind of fell away into his memories. You know the way it can happen to you. Sure, you're a storyteller, of course you know. And then suddenly he popped back to reality. And there was an old woman sitting at the side of him and she says, "Hello, boy, and how are you today?" And he said, "Oh, I'm fine." And she says, "I'm starving. Have you anything to eat? Have you anything at all to eat?" And of course, nobody in Ireland in those days left the house without of the prata le de foca, without the potato for your pocket. They'd cook the potatoes in their skins, and then if you kept them in your pocket, they'd keep your hips warm, and your hands too if you put your hands into your pocket. Well, his prata le de foca, his potatoes for the pocket, they'd gone cold over the course of the day. But he pulled them out now, and he gave one to the woman, and he looked at the other one himself. And while he was thinking about eating his one, she put herself on the outside of her one. And it was gone. And she thought to herself, now it was lovely, but a bit of salt wouldn't have gone amiss. And then he looked at her in her shining eyes, in her curranty face. It looked just like a curranty cake, all wrinkled. And there was something about her eyes that would draw you in. "Aren't you the good boy?" she said. "Aren't you the good, well-reared boy to give a woman something to eat when she had need of it?" And then she started to dig in her old woman's bag. You know, the type that always smells like old dog, old wet dog. And then she began to pull this thing out of the bag, bit by bit by bit. It was the longest knitted scarf he'd ever seen in his life. And he was hoping to himself that she wouldn't give it to him. And as if she read his mind, she said, "This scarf is for you, boy. This scarf is for you." And she started to wrap it around his neck. Once, twice, 7 times it went around the boy's neck. And then she said the crazy thing that only old women get away with. She looked at him, and in all seriousness she said, "A scarf, boy, is a barrier, but not just against the weather. The scarf is a barrier, and not just against the weather." And even though it sounded quite crazy, it went into that place in the back of your head where you know you're never going to forget it. "Thanks very much," he said, and he began to smell the scarf. Oh, if you could have only smelt it, Jim. It smelt of warm kitchens and apple tarts with a bit of clove in them and happy memories. And he was so delighted that she had given it to him. "Thanks very much," he said. "'Twas lovely meeting you." "Lovely meeting you too," she said. "Until the next time." And as he was going up the hill thinking to himself, he was thinking, I wouldn't mind meeting that woman again. That was at the end of October. And any time he felt lonely for those few weeks, he'd take a smell of the scarf and he'd remember the strange and wonderful day, and he wouldn't feel as lonely. But then it came to November, the month of the dead, the month of remembrance, where you made the list of all of the people who had gone before you. They say in Ireland you die twice. The first time when your spirit leaves your body, and the second time when your name leaves the lips for the last time of the one that has loved you most. So now he was very sure and very diligent to remember all of the people who had meant something to him. I remember my Auntie Mary, and she always given me the tenpence growing up, he said. I remember my father and how he bought me my first pint. I remember my Uncle Ted and how he got me started on the smoking. I remember my mother and how I didn't even have to think about something before she'd have it there in front of me. And so as he made the list, as he recounted the names, the loneliness grew in him, and he had to get out of that cottage. He ran down the windy path to where the Atlantic Ocean was singing her eternal song. He sat up on his grey rock and he hoped that the woman would come. And as if by hoping, she appeared. "Hello, boy," she said. "Isn't it great to see you? Do you know what I'd love today? Do you know what I'd really love?" "What would you love?" he said. "Oh, I'd love a beautiful Irish session, a session with stories and music and songs, jokes, even maybe a bit of dancing. Would you like that?" "I would like that," he said. "Come on, so," she said. "Let's go for a dance around the rock." "But we have no music," he said. "Ah, there's no need of instruments," she said. "We can use the ceola bela, we can use the lilting from our own mouths, the tunes that you keep in the cheek of your face. Rat-ta-ta-ta, rat-ta-ta-ta, la 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 la, rat-ta-ta-ta, rat-ta-ta-ta, la 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 la. And as she lilted the tune, they danced round and round that grey rock until they were no breath, cheeks rosy, eyes glistening. "That was brilliant," he said. "That was brilliant. And now," she says, "have you got a song for me?" "No," he said. I wouldn't sing for you, 'twill might set you fleeing down the road, but I could tell you a story." And he told her the story of the Coppel Bán na Mara, the white horses of the sea that came over the Atlantic Ocean from Tirn and Og through the Ceod Riachta, through the magic mist. And she listened, enraptured, as if she was hearing it for the first time, even though everyone in Ireland knows those stories as well as they know the back of their own hands. And at the end of the story, she said, "Sure, I'll sing you a song now." And she sang, "Trasna down to Dalshire, Dalshire, Slán leis an uignas is slán leis an fear." "Slán leis an uignas," he said. "Goodbye to the loneliness. Wouldn't I love to be able to say that?" "But aren't you here with me now?" she said, "and we're not lonely in one another's company." "No," he said, smiling. "I've had a great day altogether." And then she began that dive into her old woman's handbag. "Stop it now," he said. "Don't be giving me any more presents." "Ah, shut up out of that," she said. "'Twas lovely to see you." And she took out a teeny, tiny little thing. "What's that?" he said. "That's the spice of life," she said. Do you know what the spice of life is? Do you know, Jim? The spice of life is salin, is salt. Sure, you could have a plain old potato like we had the last day, but if you had a melty bit of butter on it and a sprinkling of salt, sure would make the teeth swim in your mouth in anticipation of eating it. "'Twould all right," he said. And as she passed the tiny little container over, she said the crazy mad thing that only old women get away with. "That," she said, "is salt, and it can cure ya or kill ya. It can cure ya or kill ya." Thanks very much, he said, putting the little container of salt into his pocket and tightening the scarf that she gave him the last time around his neck. They left one another smiling, and he made his way up the windy, windy road to his little cottage, and all was well for the rest of November. But then Christmas was coming, and it was Advent, the time when you prepare, and there was loads of happy faces in the town making their plans, and the cottage never, ever felt as lonesome as it did that December. He put his hands up into the rafters and he took down the rusty old tin box that came one Christmas long ago full of biscuits. His mam called it an boscadriachta, the magic box. Only with her magnificent eyes could you make this rusty old thing into a magical item. He took the top off the box and he looked at her little fripperies, the decorations that she had made from crepe paper, coloured crepe paper over all of the years. The tiny little robin that she had carved with such love that it looked as if it would open its beak at any moment and sing you a song. And the stupid old thing that made no sense to him, something he had tried to make her in school, and only a mother's love would have meant that it made its way into the boscadriachta, into the magical box. He put her fripperies all around the cottage, just like she would have done. And then the loneliness clawed at his heart. He couldn't stick it any more inside there. He knew now it was well past the witching hour. He knew it was dark out there, and he knew it was the middle of winter with the rain lashing at the edge of Ireland. But he couldn't stay there. Do you understand? He couldn't stay there. So he pulled on his boots and he pulled on his coat and he put the collar up against the wind and he put his hands deep into his pockets and he put on his woolly hat and he took to the road, leaning in against the wind, making his way towards the Atlantic song. And as his eyes became accustomed to the dark, dark night, he saw a shape coming towards him. And he hoped that it would be the old woman. But he was taking nothing for granted. He kept his eyes peeled until she came out of the gloom and she was dragging something along with her, something over her shoulder, and he ran to meet her to relieve her of this burden. And she looked at him and she says, "How are you, boy?" As if they had arranged to meet. And he said, "I'm fine. I'm a small bit cree-brishta. I'm a small bit heartbroken." "Ah, that comes to us all," she said. And as she looked into his eyes, and as he looked back into hers, a knowing came between them. A knowing that this would be her last Christmas. And as if she was reading his mind again, she said, "All my Christmases are behind me now, boy. This will be the last time that we will meet." And he couldn't hold her gaze. He looked away, and when he looked up, she was looking at him very hard. "I have this present for you," she said. "What is it?" he said. "It's the harness for a horse," she said. Something in his face broke. And something around his heart tightened. And even though that only lasted for seconds, she caught it. "What is it, boy? What's wrong with you?" "I'd love a horse," he said. "I'd love a horse, but I don't have the money for one. I'd never had the head for saving. There's no horse in our barn now." "That's your head talking, boy," she said. "That's your head talking. But what is your heart saying? What is your heart saying?" "My heart is saying that I'd love a horse." "Well then," she said, and she gave him the harness as if it was a fait accompli, and he took it, almost believing that a horse was on the way to him. He looked away again then, and when he looked back, she was gone. But in his mind's eye, he heard her words, the words that were offered with this harness. A harness can gentle a horse, boy. A harness can gentle a horse. He turned then to walk home with his little harness and the flicker of a hope that he might get a horse. And that's when he heard it. That's when he heard the perfect silence. He could see the waves rushing the shore now underneath the full moon as the sky had cleared. But he couldn't hear them. He looked around to see if he could hear anything else. The flowing of the grass. He stamped his foot on the ground. He could hear nothing. The Shandini, the old people, they always said that if you came across a perfect silence like this, that the veils had twined and you were in between worlds, with one foot not in this world, nor in the next, but in the in-between. He turned now fast to walk the windy road up to his house, and that's when he saw her. The beautiful white horse, perfect in every single detail, not a blemish on her, as if she'd stepped out of that white moon herself. And he knew this was a couple born a Mara. He knew this was a white horse of the sea. And he tried to tear his eyes away, but she had put the Tarkuim on him. She had put the come hither on him. And he found himself walking towards her as if he was hypnotized. And he thought to himself, if I get on her back, she will surely drown me. She'll bring me to the sea. And that's when he heard the voice of the old woman in the back of his head, where those important messages had been saved. A scarf, boy, is a barrier, but not just against the weather. A scarf is a barrier, but not just against the weather. He began to unfurl the scarf from around his neck. He put it under, behind his knees, and around his neck in a great figure of 8. And then, because he could not help himself, he got up on the back of the white horse, and she rose in one fluid movement as if she was made of water. She turned then towards the Atlantic Ocean and began to walk there. Don't bring me to the water, he said. Don't drown me. I'm not ready yet to leave this life. That's when she heard it. His glutes were not glued to her back, as he should have been. There was some barrier between him and the horse, and she began to get afraid. So she began to run further and further, and still he called for her to stop. Muirish had ridden horses from before he could walk, so he curled his hands into the mane of the horse, and straight away became snakes that bit his hand. He started to scream, and then in the back of his head he heard that voice, "Solin, boy, salt. Salt can cure you or kill you. Salt can cure you or kill you." And he took the salt from out of his pocket and he sprinkled it all down the mane of the horse, and the writhing mane became hair one more time. Now the horse, all she wanted to do was to throw him from her back. So she reared up, and if she did, he took the harness from off his shoulder and put it around her head. Straight away she became gentle and docile, a horse like any other. And as he took the reins and walked her up the windy, windy path towards his house, he shared his plan with her. In the spring, he said, "We will plough the ground out behind the house. I will save the money and plant those crops, and we will buy a black horse, and you and him will live together in peace and happiness, and we will have a lovely life. Everything he said unfurled just as he had said it, except the Copplebon would not look at him and would not eat, and her ribs began to show through her great white body. Well, think of it. If it was you, and you were caught in the land of Tirn and Og with all its delights, would you want to stay there, or would you want to come back to your family? So he took her out into the back garden in the middle of the springtime, and he put one hand on either side of her harness. He pulled her down then and looked into her eyes. I'll never forget you, my Bonry and Bawn. I'll never forget you, my White Queen. For with you, my fortunes changed. And he kissed her on the nose. So I'm going to take the harness off you now. And when I take the harness off, know that you have the Céad Míle Fáilte. Know that you have the 100,000 welcomes. But if you want, he said, to go back to your kith and kin, then you can leave me. And she looked at him very deep into his soul. And he stood there looking back at her. And at the end of it all, she flicked her tail and jumped over the little stone wall, down the windy road and over the cliff, into the sea, back to where she had come from. Muirish didn't have the Copplebon anymore, but he had this story, and it has lasted for 200 years.
Oh. Oh.
That's one of the old ones, Jim.
It is. Oh, my goodness. I'm speechless. You know, all along the way, these other stories would come to me, but no, stay here. Stay here.
Yeah.
Oh. Can you remember learning that story?
Yes. So a lot of my stories are caught in mid-air, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And my great-grandmother had this thing, you know, when she was young, she didn't have formal learning because she was born before Irish independence. Mm-hmm. She was born Irish to the British Empire, and she was born a girl, and she was left on her own at 6.5 years old, you know. So how did she learn things? She remembered them, and her memory was incredible. And if you were worried about telling a story, she'd say, just say what you see, girl. Just say what you see. So she'd put pictures in your head. Mm-hmm. So when I heard that story first, and I would have heard that story from my mother, it was given to me as like pictures in my head. There's an awful lot of descriptive language, and you can see paintings in your brain as it unfurls. So, yeah, so that's how I would have heard it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it certainly, that's the way you share it. There's no question.
Yeah.
Oh. I just, it's so rich. There's so much in there.
So rich.
Yeah.
My granny lived in Cove and told me that was a Cove story, but they tell a story which is basically the same story in Scotland, and they call it the Kelpie story.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, so yeah. So yeah, so it's
well, and stories. So that one I told, for example, it's been told in every culture across Europe. Sometimes it's mixed with when the daughter is expelled, she takes on a new shape, not just a disguise. There's one where she takes on a cloak of mouse skins, you know, and they get much richer.
I love that. I love the shape-shifting ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and I don't want to diminish the story. I have to mention the story. I won't tell it. Tell it
Yeah.
another time. Of a pony that appears to an innkeeper under curious circumstances and is unintentionally captured
Mhm.
by the innkeeper and must finally be released. And that's all I want to say about it. But it's a real kind of love story in a way, in an
Oh,
unconventional way. So
yeah.
next
I
time
will
I'll
look
share.
forward to hearing that
Yeah.
the next time for sure.
Oh, well, I think this is a good time to draw this podcast to a close.
Hmm.
Um,
And in the wings for the next
yes.
time waits Mary, Mary of the lanes,
Okay.
the
So
one
we have
collected by my sister. Yeah.
yes. So we have a couple.
So tune in next time,
That's right.
everybody. Will we say goodbye from Cork?
And goodbye from New York, but only for a while because we'll be back again with another episode. Absolutely.
We can't wait to see you on the Story Road one more time. And from this time till that, be safe on the Story Road.